After solving the problem of the two women, the matter is simple. The things Xiaoai had already been prepared, and only the people they were riding on were left. What Xiaoai prepared for the three was a small starship. The spacecraft is not large, and the front and rear are about 20 meters. The speed is good, the defense is medium, the weapon is weak. Of course, for the attack power of the weapon, Suming and the others did not ask for it. Otherwise, really the two subgod levels are vegetarian? Moreover, there is now a time bomb, Miss Ling Xian. If you encounter someone who is dying and preparing to do something, I believe that Miss Ling Xian will be very happy to let him taste what true cruelty is. For this, Suming did not have any unexpected thoughts. When she was ready, Suming sent a message to Ling Xian and asked her to come to the cabin to gather. It didn't take long for a calm-looking spirit to appear in the sub-cabin. Now Ling Xian is not so murderous, at least it has converged a lot. Of course, not to mention laughter. However, after seeing at least the two, she still tapped some heads, and then got into the spaceship without looking back. It seems that Ling Xian's mood has improved a lot. Right? Suming was not sure, looked at the little loli, and the little loli looked at him. Both read the look of depression and distress from the other. Forget it, no matter how much it is, let's go to the Nova Legion first. He shook his head, and Suming discharged all the distractions in his heart, and then pulled the little loli and entered the spaceship. After entering, Suming had already begun to inform Xiaoai. Xiaoai, the destroyer has entered stealth standby mode and is waiting for my summons. Yes, brother. As soon as Xiao Yi's words fell, the lights inside the entire destroyer were already dimmed by half. All features can be turned off and all turned off. At this time, if you look at it from the outside, you can see that a huge warship is disappearing into the starry sky at an extremely fast speed. In less than a minute, the destroyer had disappeared without a trace. Brother, the destroyer is already on standby and stealth, waiting for your call. Xiao Yi also answered Suming immediately. After seeing this scene, Suming also immediately began a new journey. Let's go. As soon as the words fell, he saw a passage suddenly appear on the side of the cabin. The passage is only about 10 meters. Through the passage, you can easily see the outside scenery. Well, a barren starry sky. After that, things were simple. With a light movement, the spacecraft was like an arrow off the string, rushing through the passage, and then heading towards the starry sky world outside. And when they left, the passage also closed, and then disappeared into the universe again. This one is very small and the cab is crowded. Therefore, Suming sat with Ling Xian. Now Ling Xian saw small meteorites disappearing behind him rapidly, and his mood slowly improved. She liked the process of being with Suming and then enjoying the speed. Or, simply enjoying the time with Suming. However, when she saw the little loli next to Suming, she suddenly had a terrible thought. If Xiao Budian is not there, then isn't it our two-person world? As soon as he had this thought, other thoughts of Ling Xian could not stop popping up. If there is a two-person world, then my relationship with him should grow by leaps and bounds, right? Or, even if you can't advance by leaps and bounds, you should be able to feel the hearts of the two, right? Feeling my heart, he shouldn't be so angry with me and will definitely spoil me, right? At this moment, Ling Xian's head was running at high speed, and the speed was not at all faster than when Suming was trying to deal with the little loli just now. Even, the original spiritual reality is very strong, overclocking is naturally not a problem. Therefore, strictly speaking, her speed at this moment had long surpassed Suming. However, as he thought about it, the more he grew, the more she felt that the little loli seemed a little redundant. Even, he unconsciously classified little loli into troublesome divisions. She didn't know this herself. You know, her relationship with little loli.
Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, and thank you for your support. If there's a favorite novel on the channel and you want the next part, you're just one step away. Become a Patreon member and I can make it depending on your tier. Thank you for your attention.
Is also excellent, and she usually loves little loli very much. Then, inexplicably, little loli became a burden. However, at this time, the spirit that had been occupied by Suming naturally did not notice this. At the same time, the little loli, who was enjoying the scenery outside and was happy, suddenly felt an inexplicable malice. Moment. Little loli fell from her happy mood, and her mind was full of doubts and distress. Who the hell is targeting me? Feeling the malice from an unknown place, the little loli is also unprecedentedly serious. After all, she also knew that when she came to her position, there was no whim, only warnings. That is, if he has a hunch that someone is targeting him, then someone is really targeting him. However, she could not find the source. That shows that the strength of this person who targets him is at least comparable to him. That's why it's enough for little Lori to face it squarely. However, as she pondered for a while, she was also very speechless. After all, everyone she knew, except for Suming, seemed to be more powerful than her. Little Lori silently counted the number of people, not to mention his father's generation. Just in her generation, there are several people who are better than him. For example, this Ling Xian's sister. Also, Ling Xian's younger siblings, and an older brother. The founding god, Eternal, had 7 children and claimed to have 7 eternal sons. And Ling Xian ranked second. However, little Loli is miserable, relying on strength. She is the last in this group of strong second generations. For this result, little Loli is also very helpless and speechless. Sister Ling Xian, it shouldn't be possible. Looking at the silly Ling Xian next to her, little Loli silently ruled out the Ling Xian. After all, Ling Xian's anger just now had obviously gone down a lot, and in her opinion, relying on the relationship between the two, Ling Xian could not calculate her. Then, little Loli just like that, extremely cleverly let go of the most correct answer. Of course, Suming naturally didn't know about this. He was thinking about the next plot. So, just like that, the three of them were silent, all thinking deeply. And their spaceship crossed one defense line after another without any obstacles, and then flew towards the capital star of the Nova Legion. Less than half an hour. Everything on the capital star is already visible to the naked eye. Underscore in this way, the three of them were silent, all thinking deeply. And their spaceship crossed one defense line after another without any obstacles, and then flew towards the capital star of the Nova Legion. Less than half an hour. Everything on the capital star is already visible to the naked eye. After a bell, after the spacecraft docked at the designated port, the three of them disembarked in unison. Everything in Capital Star is similar to Earth, except that it seems that it has a more high-tech feeling, and moreover, the people here are richer. However, fortunately, many people here are no different from Earthlings. Therefore, several people on this planet were not watched. It's just that the appearance of little Loli and Ling Xian has caused frequent side-eyes. Of course, the two of them are used to this. After all, Ling Xian's level of appearance would be very unexpected if no one saw it. After arriving on this planet, little Loli is very active. Completely forget about someone calculating her just now, like a happy little angel, bouncing around, about to play everywhere. For this, Suming did not stop him. After all, on this planet, only she bullies others, and no one dares to bully her. Therefore, Suming's attitude was very clear, let her go. For so many years, I also suffocated the little Loli. And Ling Xian is also very satisfied with the crazy play of little Loli. After all, little Loli went to play alone, isn't it the world of two people left for them? For this, Ling Xian silently praised the behavior of the little Loli, and had secretly decided that based on today's performance, he would definitely treat the little Loli well in the future. Little Loli without the control of the two, this moment really experienced the breath of freedom, like a stiff little wild horse. The next moment there is no shadow. After the little Loli disappeared, Ling Xian looked at Suming gently, as if waiting for him to decide on the next trip. Suming looked at Ling Xian, then at the unfamiliar environment around him, and after smiling slightly, he led her towards a small door. Now Suming has to determine the current time, or the plot has reached that step now, and at this time, looking for the one who sold the cosmic spirit ball of Xingzhe can be determined. Junqi's location, Suming remembered very clearly. It was easy to find that door. This time, Junqi's shop door was not closed, but wide open. Then, Suming naturally pulled Ling Xian towards the inside, and Suming held his little hand, and Ling Xian's neck was red. However, although he felt very shy, Ling Xian did not refuse, and silently followed behind Suming. This section of the journey, although it was more than 10 meters later, made Ling Xian eat honey, and his heart was sweet. Suming and the two, the handsome man and the woman are beautiful and noble, and they are not ordinary people at a glance. Junqi also eats by eyesight, and when he sees the two of them, he should be either rich or noble, and have the strength to be on his own saint. Therefore, after seeing the two enter the store, they did not have the slightest hesitation, and they immediately greeted them. Two of you, what are your orders? I came here to inquire about something. Suming didn't talk nonsense either, and went straight to the point when he came up, inquiring about things. Hearing this, Junqi frowned slightly. What kind of business is he engaged in? He himself does not know. The most taboo thing for those who do this is to sell their employer or employee, and after selling, their credibility will be ruined. Originally, if someone else came, he would refuse. However, seeing Ling Xian and Suming, Junqi was a little hesitant. He is not a fool. From Ling Xian, he felt great pressure, and even felt that if the other party wanted to die by himself, his thoughts could be slightly moved, and he didn't need to do it himself. However, what surprised him very much was that even if he was such a strong man, he was still a man who looked handsome, although his temperament was very good, but he didn't seem to have the slightest strength. Of course, although from the feeling, this man does not have a trace of strength, but fools know that the person who can make that kind of woman fall in love with, how can it be an ordinary person? It must be that his strength is too low, and the strength of the two families cannot be perceived. Seeing that Junqi was hesitating, Suming did not force it, but explained. Don't worry, I'm not here to trouble him, I'm here to help him. Hearing this, Junqi didn't believe it at all. After all, you come to help, you can always know him, you can just send a message yourself, and use it to ask me? Of course, he can only complain slightly in his heart about this paragraph, and he dare not say it. After all, he is not a fool. Therefore, he can only laugh. This adult, this little one really can't do it. You know, the most taboo thing for those who do our business is to leak privacy. He chose very correctly and did not speak out from his heart. Otherwise, the plot will definitely develop as he feared, or even more serious. After all, if he did this, Ling Xian would definitely let him know why the flowers were so red. Because, although Ling Xian is very sweet now, it does not mean that his anger has disappeared. That's right, Ling Xian's mood is very strange now. On the surface, it is very sweet, with a touch of shame. But, in fact, under the sweetness, there is a lot of anger hidden. It's just that the current anger has been completely suppressed by Suming's honey behavior, and even Ling Xian himself didn't feel it. Hearing Junqi's words, Suming couldn't help but frown. He understood what Junqi meant. However, in his opinion, if he does not understand where the plot is now, what will he do? If the Nova Legion was still fighting early, and everything was caused by misinformation, wouldn't he be here for a year? His time is precious. Therefore, he must now know where Star-Lord is now. Therefore, after seeing Junqi's refusal, his whole face was bad. And after seeing his bad face, Ling Xian's face was also bad. After all, this is the world of Suming and his two. She hopes that in their two-person world, both of them will be happy from the beginning and happy to the end. Therefore, under her pressure, this Junqi did not support his work, and insisted on destroying the two-person world between him and Suming. After thinking of this, Ling Xian immediately became murderous. She hopes that in their two-person world, both of them will be happy from the beginning and happy to the end. Therefore, under her pressure, this Junqi did not support his work, and insisted on destroying the two-person world between him and Suming. After thinking of this, Ling Xian immediately became murderous. That's right, it's a killing intent. You know, although Ling Xian is very kind and gentle. However, that was after getting to know Suming. Before Suming, that is, during the time in the bar, she solved those who had moved their minds, but she didn't blink, and she was ruthless from beginning to end. Moreover, in the comics, Ling Xian is not a good stubble. When his eldest brother killed Eternity and stole the eternal position, although she did not directly intervene to help, this does not mean that she does not know. He who doesn't even put his own father in his eyes, for Junqi, he doesn't put it in his eyes, and even kills him, without blinking his eyelids. Therefore, at this moment, Ling Xian's murderous aura instantly leaked out. Her killing intent was unabashedly pressed towards Junqi. The next moment, Junqi saw an image like the end of the world. In his field of vision, Ling Xian was like a god and demon who was unique in heaven and earth, with a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood under her feet, and endless creatures crying and calling for help behind her, as if she was born to kill. At that moment, Junqi's eyes were directly stupid, and despair was all filled in his mind. At this moment, he seemed to have been abandoned by the world. He could feel the killing intent or disgust that everything from this world was against him. Like, he is superfluous to the world, just damn it. Damn it. Suddenly, this idea has been incapable of letting go since it was born in his head, and it has been entrenched in the depths of his soul, and it is getting bigger and bigger. In Suming's opinion, the current Junqi is very strange. His eyes are blank, like the walking dead, and his whole body is filled with a rich dead qi, as if he has been dead for many years. Moreover, Junqi kept chanting something incomprehensible like "Don't leave me, I'll die," because Ling Xian's killing intent this time was very purposeful. Therefore, even if Suming was beside Ling Xian, and even holding Ling Xian's little hand, he didn't feel the slightest. After all, Ling Xian's strength was inferior to him by unknown how many levels. Therefore, in Suming's opinion, Wan Karen was very strange. Of course, he didn't think about Ling Xian for the first time. After all, in his opinion, although his little spirit is a little tempered at times, he is still very well behaved and very obedient on the whole. And that little temper is also very understanding, but the villain is also the eldest miss. Therefore, in Suming's cognition, Ling Xian has always been a very gentle person. Therefore, in his opinion, Junqi's performance is very strange. However, then something even more strange happened to him. I saw that the current Junqi was pale, without a trace of blood, and the pupils of a pair of eyes were also sharply dilated, and the rich despair was accompanied by the death qi, and the death haunted his body. Then, Junqi seems to have lost hope in life. Trembling hands, pinching his neck fiercely, it was very strong, as if he was not pinching himself, but an enemy who did not share the sky with him. For this, Suming was very surprised. What's going on? If you don't say it, how can you still look like the end of the world, and still pinch yourself? How can the bitter meat meter be popular on this planet? At this moment, Suming was very surprised. I was confused by Junqi's set of operations. However, after a while, he seemed to have made a different discovery. Because, as time passed, Junqi's originally pale skin began to turn red at a speed visible to the naked eye, then dark red, and finally purple. And at this time, Junqi's hand still did not loosen the posture, but became tighter and tighter. If you don't strangle yourself, I will believe it with you. At this moment, Suming was a little suspicious. What's the situation? It seems, does this seem to be a bitter meat plan? After all, he has not seen who plays such a ruthless kung fu in the bitter meat. This is to kill his own rhythm. After discovering the problem, Suming also reacted immediately and hurriedly ran up, ready to pull Junqi's arm out. And after Ling Xian saw Suming throw his arm off and turn to rescue that Junqi, although the anger in his heart accumulated again, he also knew that Suming should not want this person to die. Therefore, she quietly eliminated half of the dead and desperate qi that haunted Junqi. At the same time, Junqi, who was originally pinching himself, seemed to see a ray of light in despair, and the dead qi and despair on his body decreased a lot, not to mention, even the strength in his hand was a little easier. And at this time, Suming held his hand tightly and pulled the two hands apart. However, when he pulled his hand away, he was still a little puzzled. After all, from the way it looked just now, Junki's own hand strength should not be small, and even Suming had already decided that if he couldn't pull it out, then he would have to save this person with a mecha. After all, not to say that this person is a local, just say that he has the movement of Star-Lord on him, Suming can't let him die. However, the process of rescuing this person was extremely easy. Suming didn't even have much effort to pull Junki's hand out. Is it really a bitter meat plan? At this moment, Suming was also stunned. After Junki's hands were liberated, the whole person was like a fish leaving the water, with a big mouth, a straight neck, and constantly panting. His face also showed that kind of smile after the disaster. Ventilation was restored, and Junki's skin also recovered quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye, as if everything was an illusion. Of course, ignore the only thick fear that remains in Junki's eyes. In particular, when he saw the expressionless spirit appearing, his feet trembled, as if he had seen a ghost. However, just as he was shaking vigorously, an indifferent voice immediately appeared in his mind. Don't shake. In addition, you are not allowed to tell him about me. In addition, what he asks you, you will answer, and you are not allowed to hide a little. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. In particular, when he saw the expressionless spirit appearing, his feet trembled, as if he had seen a ghost. However, just as he was shaking vigorously, an indifferent voice immediately appeared in his mind. Don't shake. In addition, you are not allowed to tell him about me. In addition, what he asks you, you will answer, and you are not allowed to hide a little. This voice was very abrupt, and even startled Junki. After all, this voice in his ears was as if it came from the ice and snow, and he couldn't help but shiver. After hearing this, Junki also immediately replied, "Got it, my lord." For Suming, it was very weird now. In his eyes, Junki had just recovered a lot, and then began to seem to encounter a ghost again, not only trembling all over, but even an inexplicable sentence appeared. This made him a little puzzled, so he couldn't help but ask, "What do you know? What's wrong with you?" After Junki heard it, he just wanted to explain that this sentence was not said to Suming. However, when he just had this meaning, the familiar indifferent voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Don't say." This sentence directly made Junki swallow the words that he was just about to say alive. What's wrong? Seeing Junki like this, Suming was also confused. Hearing his question, Junki looked at him with some fear, and then looked at Lingxian with fear. Now his heart was full of admiration for Suming. After all, the fact that such a strong and terrifying woman surrendered to the hands of this ordinary person simply made him feel very impressed. Of course, he just thought about this matter, and he would never dare to let him say it. After all, that woman's murderous aura was not fake. People who can exude this murderous aura are not good stubble. Therefore, he thought for a moment before softly replying, "That, there was a crime just now, please bear with the adults." Junki's tone was very careful, as if he was afraid of hearing half a word from Suming's mouth. However, Suming did not reply immediately, but pointed to his shaking legs and asked softly, "So, can you not shake? You this jitter frequency, look at me dazzled." Hearing this question, Junki was about to cry. This is really not something he can control. After all, he is really afraid. It is impossible for him to force himself not to be afraid, right? However, before he could reply, the voice in his brain sounded again. "Don't shake, I'll kill you if you shake." This time, the voice was even colder, and Junki, who was already worried and afraid, completely collapsed. With weak feet, the whole person sat directly on the ground, and then it was like a puddle of mud. If it weren't for the shaking from time to time, outsiders wouldn't recognize another person here. This moment made Suming startled. What's the situation? Is this a new style of touching porcelain? What? Can I help it? Seeing this, Suming was a little confused. However, after thinking about it, it seems that he has not met Junki from beginning to end. In other words, Junki should have some kind of disease himself, and judging from the frequency of shaking just now, the disease is not light. After thinking of this, Suming also immediately said to Junki, "What? I'm just here to ask, have you seen the cosmic spirit orb?" Hearing the word cosmic spirit ball, Junki suddenly replied a little strength, looked at Suming, and directly said what he knew without concealment. "Sir, I have seen the cosmic spirit ball. About 3 days ago, that kid from Star-Lord came to me with this cosmic spirit ball." Hearing this, Suming knew that the Nova Legion war should be the last few days. However, in order to verify whether there was anything unexpected in the matter, he still asked, "And what about later?" Hearing this, Junki hesitated slightly, secretly glanced at Ling Xian with the afterglow from the corner of his eye, and then plucked up the courage to say, "Because, this matter involves Ronan, I didn't do his business, and I just threw him out." Although Suming knew about this, he was still very curious, and couldn't help but ask him, "Ronan, so scary? Even when you hear his name, you are afraid of this." At the mention of Ronan, Junki's already trembling body became even more trembling. There is also a hint of fear in the tone. "Adult, you don't know that Ronan is a madman. Everywhere he goes, there is all killing. Even the old people and children are not spared. The whole person is a group of butchers." Suming naturally knew this. However, he is more curious, from the movie or from reality, the strength of the Nova army is not bad. Why did he not take the initiative to snipe Ronan? After thinking of this, he also immediately asked Junki, "That. Why didn't you take the initiative to eliminate Ronan? Your Nova Legion isn't bad either, right?" Hearing this question, Junki hesitated slightly, and then said, "This. I don't know, you're going to ask Nova Supreme." Hearing this, Ling Xian's brows furrowed slightly. The murderous aura on his body couldn't help but radiate a trace towards Junki. It was this slight, but it was perceived by the tortured Junki Mingrui. In an instant, he was frightened by a murderous aura. After all, the desperate experience just now, he definitely didn't want to experience it a second time. Therefore, before Suming could react, he knelt in front of Suming in a hurry, and then said miserably, "Sir, I really didn't lie to you, I really don't know these things." Seeing him like this, Suming was also confused. "I didn't blame you, don't be so serious, right?" Hearing this, Junki felt that the murderous aura that was entangled in his body slowly began to dissipate. At this time, he showed an expression of the aftermath, and then confirmed again. "Sir, you really didn't blame me." "No, I just came to inquire about things." Suming was a little helpless, and he didn't know what Junki's ghostly expression meant. However, he really didn't mean to blame Junki. After all, he is a businessman, and it is very normal for him not to know about the things decided by these high-level officials. Suming was a little helpless, and he didn't know what Junki's ghostly expression meant. However, he really didn't mean to blame Junki. After all, he is a businessman, and it is very normal for him not to know about the things decided by these high-level officials. And the reason why he frowned at that time was also very simple, that is, he thought about whether he was going to meet Nova Supreme and ask me well. However, considering that things were very troublesome, he dismissed the idea. At this time, the matter was finally settled, and there was no need for him to stay here. Therefore, he also said to Ling Xian, "Let's go, things are settled, let's go around here." To be honest, this is his first time traveling around an alien. Well, Asgard does not count. Hearing him say this, a smile bloomed on Ling Xian's face again. At that moment, her smile was like the warm rising sun of winter, as if it could melt all despair and anger. Even the terrified Junki subconsciously forgot the fear, leaving a strong hope. Not to mention Junki, who was very unfamiliar with Ling Xian, even Suming, who was very familiar with Ling Xian, was a little dumbfounded. Seeing Suming's sluggish appearance, the corners of Ling Xian's mouth curved into a good-looking arc again. Stretching out her hand, like a princess waiting for the prince's invitation to dance. "What's wrong, nerd?" Her voice has never been so sweet, trying to weave some kind of beautiful dream. "Okay, let's go." Suming also reacted immediately, and naturally pulled her boneless little hand over. Then, under Junki's admiring gaze, he pulled Ling Xian and walked outside. After the backs of both disappeared, Junki quickly stood up from the ground as if he had been reborn. Who is this? Why is this existence happening? Junki thought of the rich murderous aura just now, and the softness of the spring breeze just now. He couldn't believe that these two temperaments would appear in the same person, and even the two were transformed so naturally. Junki's thoughts, Suming naturally did not know, and he did not have the spare time to pay attention to this thought. Because, his current state is very strange. Now Ling Xian has completely incarnated as a queen, taking him crazy to buy and buy. He is like an emotionless piece of wood, at the mercy of the spirit. After all, he had fully seen the horror of Ling Xian's purchase. After sweeping through 10 large shopping malls in one go, Suming's legs told him that he didn't want to move at all. In order to deal with the eldest lady Ling Xian, who was in a good mood, he was also open-minded, and he almost used mecha. Because his intuition told him that if this thing was to be done to pull a quack, it would have a very bad impact. His hunch was very accurate, so he didn't say a word and followed behind. However, after 3 hours, he really couldn't stay. Sure enough, as long as it's a woman, whether it is a goddess or a woman, it is full of shopping talent. However, the effect of shopping was remarkable, and Ling Xian's anger that had accumulated a lot disappeared by half, and his face became more and more cheerful. Therefore, although Suming felt tired, he somehow felt that it was very worthwhile. The following thing was very simple. Suming completely turned into a puppeteer, closely following Ling Xian, holding his little hand, like a small follower. Only, after a while, he had a question. Ling Xian bought so many things, how did this money come from? Of course, he didn't know this question, and if Ling Xian didn't say it, he didn't dare to ask. However, in a large shopping mall, an accident was found. A group of people gathered closely together and acted as onlookers in unison. Men and women, old and young, and even many people of other races. So many melon-eating people gathered together, all next to each other, talking, cheering, and noisy. When Suming passed by, he only glanced at it, and then he didn't pay attention. After all, he didn't have the idle time to be a melon-eating mass. However, when passing by this crowd, he heard some chaotic sounds in a trance. That kid, it's a pity. Yes, I don't know which adult left her here alone. It's really big-hearted, this is good, provoking people who shouldn't be messed with. What about her adult? Why can't it come out now? I don't know, I guess I'm afraid. After all, this is the messenger of the Supreme Star. Provoke these messengers, adults are also afraid. It's a pity, such a cute little girl. Hearing the discussions of those people, an idea suddenly appeared in Suming's heart. The little girl they said wouldn't be a little lowly, would it? This idea, as soon as it appeared, was deeply rooted in his heart, and he couldn't shake it off. Therefore, he forcibly pulled the interested Ling Xian, and then under the comments of Ling Xian's doubtful eyes, he also immediately explained. Let's take a look, there seems to be some problem. Then, he pulled Ling Xian towards the outside and inside. There were a lot of people, and when he got in, he had some trouble. After seeing this scene, Ling Xian, who was being led by him, did not refuse, but let him lead him like a good girl. Even, it was very difficult to watch him squeeze people, and he couldn't help but release a trace of murderous aura. For a while, all the onlookers couldn't help but feel as if a cold wind was blowing, and couldn't help shaking their bodies. Then, in unison, they gave way to a passage. Immediately afterwards, Suming pulled Ling Xian to take advantage of this opportunity and walked inside. After entering, Suming found that although there were a lot of people outside, he still underestimated it. A large circle with a diameter of about 20 meters, full of people outside. Inside the circle, there is a man and a woman, plus a small loli. Yes, Suming had a hunch that it was not wrong, that little loli was a swallowing sister. And a man and a woman are the iconic golden men on the Supreme Star. And now something is wrong. The woman snuggled into the man's arms, her mouth kept moving, and she didn't know what to say. However, from her snarky expression, it can be seen at a glance that it is not a good word. And the man also looked at the little loli with a gloomy face, without saying a word. Phila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. Inside the crowd, the situation is very dignified. The woman snuggled into the man's arms, her mouth kept moving, and she didn't know what to say. However, from her snarky expression, it can be seen at a glance that it is not a good word. And the man also looked at the little loli with a gloomy face, without saying a word. As for little Lori, her current state is very interesting. Pouting, his face was unflattering, and he looked up at the two with a huff. Seeing little Lori's expression, Suming was relieved. It seems that although the little loli is a little angry, she did not suffer a loss. At most, she lost the battle of words. Of course, although the little loli did not suffer a loss. However, he still took the initiative to move forward. And this move of him and Ling Xian must be very conspicuous in front of the melon-eating masses who are very careful by everyone. In an instant, everyone's eyes were cast in unison. At this moment, the already very noisy scene suddenly froze in unison. Even the 2 Supreme Star people looked over, and the man's gaze towards Ling Xian was full of amazement. Then, all the talk began to come suddenly. Who is this? I don't know, but going out at this time, isn't it uncomfortable? Could it be that these 2 are the parents of that little girl? It can't be, so young. However, seeing that lady, and then looking at the little girl, it really looks like a mother and daughter. Yes, it's all beautiful and cute. However, the person who provoked the Supreme Star is afraid that there will be some trouble. In an instant, the people present were also full of discussions. And the man from the Supreme Star heard everyone say that Ling Xian and little loli were mother and daughter, especially when Suming and Ling Xian were still husband and wife. His golden face turned black. And the other woman, after seeing the stunning spiritual appearance, her eyes were also full of jealousy. The aesthetics of the Supreme Star and the Earthlings are different. They think beautiful. We do not necessarily think beautiful. However, to the extent of Ling Xian and little Lori, they have long broken the boundaries of this cognition and reached an artistic level. At this level, anyone who has a certain pursuit of beauty will definitely think that the degree of beauty is realized. And Suming took Ling Xian with him, and walked towards the 2 Supreme Stars inside amid everyone's discussion and exclamation. After a while, the 2 of them had already arrived in front of the 2. Brother Suming, sister Ling Xian, why are you here? Little Lori, who was sulking, saw the 2, just like the lost little guy saw the road sign, and rushed straight towards the 2. To be honest, there was still a trace of Ling Xian. After all, the originally good second world was destroyed abruptly. But hearing little Lori's sweet cry, his trace of dissatisfaction disappeared, replaced by that trace of doting. It's like a naughty little daughter finally admitting her mistake. And everyone who saw this scene was also very surprised. Oh, it turned out to be a sister. I thought it was a mother and daughter. I said, it doesn't look like it. However, what to do now? The people of the Supreme Star can't let the 2 of them go so easily. Well, it's a pity. What about the guards? It's not that you don't know. Where do the guards dare to manage the affairs of the Supreme Star? Besides, their group is not a member of our Nova Legion at a glance, and it is not cost-effective to offend the Supreme Star for the sake of 3 outsiders. Oh, what a crime. It's just that the 2 of you don't see it directly. Oh, it's a pity. Everyone was talking about it, and when the man of the Supreme Star heard little Loli call Ling Xian's sister, his eyes bloomed with green light, like a hungry wolf who chose people to eat. However, when he saw Suming who was with the 2 women, the malice in his eyes was not concealed in the slightest. In his opinion, as a Supreme Star, where is he not being offered, an ordinary person, or is he allowed to need? Therefore, he also selectively ignored Suming. At this time, Suming and the others ignored the thoughts of the 2. Suming squatted down and looked at the little Loli, with a pampered smile in his eyes. Xiaoi, what's wrong? Hearing him mention this, little Lori's face was obviously unflattered. His face was also suddenly puffed up, his small mouth pouted, he looked at the 2 golden men with an infatuated face, and said dissatisfied. I originally came to buy something, and I fancy a little puppet, but I don't have the Nova coin they call it, and then I want to put my card here, ready to come back to sister Ling Xian to ask for money to redeem it. But this big papaya, seeing my hair card, has to say that my hair card is hers, and say that I stole her hair card. Little Lori became more and more angry the more she spoke, and finally she couldn't help but stomp her foot hard. After hearing the whole incident, Suming also probably knew the beginning and end of the whole incident. It's just that little Loli revealed her wealth and was targeted. You know, the identity of the little Loli is not so simple. I am afraid that it is a small issuing card. It is all made of heavenly materials and earth treasures, and it is not impossible to arouse the greed of people with hearts. However, he was still very curious about what could make the two of him tear his face and deal directly with the little girl. Therefore, he also immediately asked, "Golly, what a hairpin, show me?" Hearing him ask, little Loli did not hesitate in the slightest, and took out an extremely delicate hairpin from the side pocket of his clothes. The moment they saw the appearance of this hairpin, everyone lost their voices in unison. Even Ling Xian was a little surprised. Because, as long as you are not a fool, you can see from the streamers on the hair card, this hair card is afraid that it is already a treasure. Even, some of the strength can feel the strong pressure from above. Feeling the pressure from a hairpin the size of a small finger sounds incredible. However, they could actually feel this kind of thing. If everyone's feelings were not strong enough, Suming would feel much more direct. The moment the hair card appeared, Xiao Yi's voice sounded from Suming's heart. "Brother, this issuance card is not simple." "Oh, what's not easy?" Suming was also a little curious. "Let's tell you so, just this hairpin can be exchanged for 2 gems. Xiaoai's tone was also a little emotional. "Oh, what's not easy?" Suming was also a little curious. "Let's tell you so, just this hairpin can be exchanged for 2 gems. Xiaoai's tone was also a little emotional. "Gem, that gem." Suming was a little confused for a while, and some couldn't react. "Infinity stones, brother, apart from gems, is there anything that can make me so eye-catching at the moment?" Xiao Yi's tone was a little helpless. Hearing Xiao Yi's words, Suming was a little silent. From the time he knew the 2 women, he knew that these 2 people were the standard strong second generation and the rich second generation. However, he never expected that the little Loli was so valuable, that a single hair card could be worth 2 infinity stones. At this moment, he never expected it. Sure enough, poverty limited my imagination. For this, Suming also had to admire, Uncle Swallow made a generous move. However, subconsciously, he thought of a question. Swallowing star is a daughter controlling. You know, the strength of star swallowing should be the most unstable among all the supreme gods. Well, with enough food, the strength should be the strongest. However, given that devouring is basically an empty stomach battle, it should be acceptable to rank last in strength. However, even so, Uncle Swallow gave these treasures to little Loli instead of bringing them on himself, increasing his combat effectiveness and avoiding being taken by 10,000 people. It can be imagined that devouring is not only as simple as daughter control, at least it must be heavy daughter control. For this, Suming also praised his foresight. Thanks to the fact that he did not bully the little Loli, otherwise, it is estimated that SF Express will arrive at the next moment. Of course, the value of this issued card to the 2 supreme stars is not entirely clear. But from the energy emanating from above, this must be a priceless thing. Even, in their supreme star, it is enough treasure that can be used as an inheritance treasure. Therefore, when the 2 saw that little Loli was alone and young and deceptive, they had the idea of occupying the treasure. However, what they didn't expect was that although the little Loli looked soft and cute, she was extremely hard, and seeing that the 2 were not vain at all, they fought hard and directly made things bigger. At this time, everyone gathered around. If it weren't for the temptation of that issuing card, he would have withdrawn long ago. However, given his status as a supreme star, he was not afraid at all. He didn't believe that the Nova Legion had come to stop him from outsiders. That's why he's so unscrupulous. However, what he did not expect was that although the regiment did not stop him, it was thought that he did not see it. However, this little Loli's family dared to stand up and stop him. Moreover, when he saw Ling Xian, Shuangzhong burst out with a strong possessiveness. The first time he saw Ling Xian, he had an idea, that is, he must make this woman his own. Even, he also has an idea, that is, to collect all the money and people. And his dirty thoughts, although Suming didn't know it, but from the green light of his eyes, he could see that this dog thing was not well. And after learning the truth of the matter from the little Loli, he did not have the slightest hesitation and walked directly up. Although he likes to tease little Loli from time to time, everyone knows that they really spoil little Loli. And now this person dares to bully little Lori, isn't this looking for death? Therefore, his tone is also very cold, without the slightest emotion, all decisive. "How do you want to die? Answer me." Hearing Suming's words, which man of the Supreme Star was slightly stunned at first, and then as if he remembered something funny, he did not hide his mockery, and said to the female companion next to him, "Haha, haha, he actually said let me die? Haha." After hearing this, the female companion next to her also showed a mocking smile and said coquettishly to the man, "My lord, this should be the funniest joke I've heard this year." Not only the 2 of them, but even the onlookers showed a strong incomprehension when they saw Suming say this. Who is this person? Dare to say such things to the messenger of the Supreme Star? I don't know, I guess it's the person who came out of the indigenous star, right? It's understandable not to know the Supreme Star. It's a pity, people are handsome, and their brains are not good. What's a pity about this? My eyes don't grow better, I provoked someone I shouldn't mess with, I deserve it. For a while, everyone was not optimistic about Suming, and they all thought that he was talking big. Of course, these people Suming did not put in his eyes, nor did he pay attention to the meaning of this group of frogs at the bottom of the well. Now he stared at the man with a strong killing intent in his tone. It seems that you didn't choose well, so I'll help you make this decision. After speaking, he clenched his fists and looked like he was going to punch the man. Seeing this scene, the man did not panic at all, the mockery in his eyes did not fade, and there was even an air conditioner to play his female companion. In his eyes, Suming was an ordinary person, and an ordinary person's punch did not pose any threat to him at all, and even his skin would not break. You know, he is from the Supreme Star whose technology and civilization have been highly developed, where they themselves have been strengthened, and their physical strength is also very strong. That's why he was so unscrupulous. And the female companion is even more exaggerated, looking like no one in sight, and she is constantly laughing with the man. Dirty idiot. After shaking his head slightly, Suming's fist did not leave a hand, and he hit the man's face fiercely. And as his fist swung out, the bracelet on his wrist also flashed a brilliant light. The next moment, the light dissipated. His entire arm has changed drastically. A brand new robotic arm was placed directly over his arm. The robotic arm is also a minimalist design, and the overall presentation is very good looking streamlined. Of course, the power of the robotic arm is not weak at all, it was accidentally made by Suming and used for fighting. And the man of the Supreme Star suddenly felt that something was wrong in his heart after seeing the light of the bracelet flickering. At this moment, he already felt the threat of death. At this moment, he also knew that if he couldn't take this time, he might die. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share, and the man of the Supreme Star suddenly felt that something was wrong in his heart after seeing the light of the bracelet flickering. At this moment, he already felt the threat of death. At this moment, he also knew that if he couldn't take this time, he might die. In a panic, he also immediately thought of a corresponding strategy. Directly pushed out the confused female companion in his arms, and then with his heart, a set of nano armor had already covered his whole body. As the messenger of the Supreme Star, he naturally has his own things at the bottom of the box. And this set of armor is already his best equipment, and it is also his strength to pretend. Originally, he was reluctant to use it. After all, although this is a good thing, the price is too high. Moreover, although he is a messenger, his kind of messenger is basically the worst kind of messenger, and can even be regarded as a 0-hour worker who usually pulls out the back pot. Therefore, he will never use this set of armor until an important moment. Originally, he thought that with his identity as the Supreme Star Messenger, he could basically cross the universe, and there should be no time to use this set of battle armor. Unexpectedly, today he met a ruthless person, who was not afraid of the pressure of the Supreme Star at all, and directly chose to do it. Moreover, this person also put a lot of pressure on him, so that he had to deal with it carefully. Therefore, he also did not have the slightest hesitation and activated his strongest hole card. Oh, Nano Warframe. Seeing the man's set of battleships, Suming was still a little surprised. After all, he had seen this thing too, and he had seen Tony use it from the movie. And the Supreme Star has this technology, he is not surprised at all. Unexpectedly, any Supreme Star can have this technology, which surprised him a little. The people of the Supreme Star are so rich. Any cat or dog can assemble a set of nano armor. Suming was slightly surprised. Moreover, he suddenly had the idea of robbing the Supreme Star. After all, he is now extremely hungry for those rich people. No way, he was fortunate that he had worked hard for many years to get 2 Infinity Stones. As a result, it was just a hairpin for the little loli. Yes, it's just a card issue. If you can't get it right, little loli can still take out a comb and kill him directly with a mirror. Therefore, the current Suming is also the enemy of all the former people. Well, although he is also a hidden rich man, after all, it is just the main structure of his vibranium to create a destroyer. Worth a lot. Of course, he was extravagant, but not as extravagant as Lee, with 2 Infinity Stones as jewelry. And, although he was distracted for more than a moment. However, the offensive in his hand is not at all, but because there is no control over him, the mechanical arm is also full of power. After all, the machinery controlled by Xiaoi. Now, seeing that Xiao Loli was bullied, Xiaoi, as a Loli at the same time, was naturally unrelenting. On the robotic arm, various urging devices are also catalyzed to the maximum state by him. For the first time, the man had already felt that his death threat had increased. The feeling of being on his back was like a tarsal maggot, making him feel like he was about to enter the land of death in the next moment. At this moment, this man's revenant had, countless thoughts were born at this moment. He had forgotten, he didn't know how long it had been, and he had never felt the danger from death since he himself was a glorious Supreme Star. Even, he relied on his connections to mix up the identity of a Supreme Star messenger. After that, those people everywhere were not respectful to him, let alone the threat of death, and he had not even heard a single heavy word. But today he remembers again the fear of being dominated by death. At this moment, the fear in his heart was like a weed, growing wildly. Even, the endless shadow of death made his face look bloodless, like a blank piece of paper. His head was blank, and in addition to fear, regret, and anger, his heart was more of a thick color of survival. He didn't want to die, he hadn't been a Supreme Star envoy for a long time, he hadn't enjoyed enough of the rights of the envoy, how could he die like this? In the shadow of death, his head also turned rapidly. Countless thoughts are also crazy multiplication, and he is also eager to find a way to survive. In this case, his witty mind also immediately spun around. Under the threat of death, a solution that was not a solution was finally figured out by his few remaining brains. Under the pressure of the murderous aura, the man couldn't care so much, holding his head, and his tone was full of temptation. Don't kill me, I am the messenger of the Supreme Star. Killing me is to provoke the authority of the Supreme Star, and the Supreme Star will definitely not let you go in the future. At this moment, the man really couldn't care so much, and he didn't have the slightest psychological burden, and directly moved the Supreme Star out. For this situation, Suming was slightly stunned. The movements in his hands couldn't help but stop. What made Suming stop was not the identity of the man, but he really did not expect this man to be so shameless, without any burden to put out his identity, and he was not afraid to embarrass the Supreme Star. As for the man, Suming stopped the arm in his hand, making him mistakenly think that Suming was afraid of the forces behind him and their Supreme Star. Therefore, after thinking of this, his confidence also immediately recovered. Even, his heart has begun to be triumphant, and he is thinking about how to use his identity to sanction this person after he gets out. This person actually embarrassed me so much, I will definitely take revenge madly. At this moment, his careful eyes were also crazy. Of course, he was not a fool, and naturally knew that he would definitely stabilize Suming in this situation. Therefore, for this, he also immediately said to Suming, "Brother, I did something wrong with this matter. I apologize for this, or do you want us to reveal it? In the future, when you come to the Supreme Star, I can also fulfill the friendship of the landlord?" His tone was full of affirmation. In his opinion, the face of the Supreme Star is still very good, and it is not the first time that he pulled the tiger skin of the Supreme Star. He has long been familiar with the scene. When he mentions the Supreme Star, everyone has to give in. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Philo novel app. His tone was full of affirmation. In his opinion, the face of the Supreme Star is still very good, and it is not the first time that he pulled the tiger skin of the Supreme Star. He has long been familiar with the scene. When he mentions the Supreme Star, everyone has to give in. However, what surprised him was that after the person in front of him heard his words, there was only a thick mockery in the corners of his eyes, and he had no intention of stopping. This time directly made the man confused. After all, it was the first time he had seen someone who did not give face to the Supreme Star. "I'm sorry, the name of the Supreme Star is useless for me." After shaking his head slightly, the robotic arm in Suming's hand suddenly accelerated, and then carried heavy force and smashed on the man's head. Bang! The first contact between the arm and the nano armor made a loud collision sound. The collision was loud and resounded throughout the mall. At this moment, the originally noisy shopping mall was completely quiet, and the needle fell audibly. All the onlookers were blinded. After a moment, everyone reacted and burst into thunderous discussions. "What's the situation? Oh my god, the people of the highest stars dare to fight. This person is a madman, right? It's almost the same if you're not a madman. I don't know what to say. Young people, you always have to learn a lesson. I'm afraid you don't know the horror of the Supreme Star. Hey, it's a pity. The group of people in the Supreme Star is a group of devils, cruel, arbitrary, and unreasonable. However, this has already happened. I hope it will not involve us. I don't know, don't you know the Supreme Star? It's just an unreasonable and arrogant new star." For a moment, everyone was not optimistic about Suming, and even thought that they would still be implicated. Therefore, many people who are afraid of things also silently take 2 steps back. And all this was naturally not put in Suming's eyes. For this kind of goods, he actually doesn't want to do it, for fear of getting his hands dirty. However, there is no way, I can only blame this product for being too bad. If he doesn't fight, he can't help it. Therefore, he wanted to impress him a little. Therefore, at this time, let alone a small Supreme Star messenger, even if the Supreme Star is here, he can kill it. For this, he did not relent in the slightest. With a punch, the person of the Supreme Star was protected by a nano armor, and he was dizzy by this punch. That's a nano armor, this kind of protection ability, even if a truck is loaded, it will not make the slightest wave. It can be seen from this that how is Suming's punch. And the man was even more embarrassed, even the nano armor was already shattered, revealing a head full of blood. The man has now been beaten by that punch so that he can't find the north, and the blood in his mouth and nose is not stopping, and he looks very terrifying. And the tragic appearance of this person also surprised everyone. After all, in their opinion, this person does not give treatment, even if he is happy to face, he dares to strike so hard and beat the envoys of the Supreme Star sect so badly. This is no longer a simple diplomatic dispute. It may even trigger a war between the stars. Of course, these things are not within Suming's consideration. What he has to do is very simple, just want to look at a hanging sample and be unhappy, just want to beat him to death. Hey, it's quite hard, I didn't expect it. After sighing slightly, Suming struck again. The mechanical arm in his hand also flashed with a violent light, without the slightest pause, accompanied by a violent breaking sound. His arm smashed towards the man again. "You are crazy, but I, the messenger of the Supreme Star, dare you do this to me?" At this moment, the man had just recovered from his dizzy state just now, and then he found a rapidly enlarged fist from his field of vision. At this moment, he really panicked, and the shadow of death once again shrouded him. He could also feel that Suming was not just going to educate him, but really wanted to kill him. And for others, Suming's move this time was also very unexpected. After all, in their opinion, the person who beat the head of the person just now is already very excessive, and now they want to strike again and kill on the spot. This is no longer a one-man thing. After all, once this happens, it will definitely provoke a war between the two planets, and they can't sit idly by. After all, the Supreme Star is notoriously arrogant and unreasonable, and the messengers of the Supreme Star die on their planet. Regardless of whether they are wrong or not, they will buckle a hat that is powerless to block. At that time, they are very troublesome. Therefore, after thinking of this, the people who originally held the mentality of watching a good show were also repeatedly discouraged. Young man, stop, don't shoot. He is a Supreme Star person, and if something happens here, we will be very troublesome. Yes, young man, spare. It's just, he's already so miserable, so he spared it, right? At this moment, in order to reduce trouble, everyone also tried their best to dissuade them, and they began to speak up, even to spare people. You can imagine how frightened these people were after seeing this man defeated, and how ridiculous their behavior was. However, the voices of these people fell in Suming's ears and seemed very ridiculous. After all, at the beginning, when the man bullied the little loli, no one stood up, but watched the excitement on the wall. Now it seems that it involves himself, but I am afraid, isn't it too twilight to come out as a peacemaker at this time? The corner of Suming's mouth showed a mocking Xiaoi, and at the same time, the strength in his hand did not decrease but increased, and his speed increased by 3 points again. And seeing that Suming ignored their dissuasion and forcibly took action, everyone was also angry. After all, this is where it is? This is the capital star of the Nova Legion. This is their territory. Here, you are an outsider, and the strong dragon can't suppress the ground snake. Isn't it a slap in the face that an ordinary person with some skills actually makes trouble on their territory? After all, if you can't cure the person of the Supreme Star, you can't cure you? Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. For more free Falu novels, https://discord.com/invite/xe89fj6q New York. Seeing Dormammu's choice, Gu Yi also smiled gently. She is not the kind of fool who clamors all day to expel darkness. She confronts Dormammu precisely because Dormammu wants to devour the earth. However, now that Dormammu has given up devouring the earth, she naturally will not provoke this strong enemy. Not to mention, Dormammu's current strength is already something she can't provoke. However, what they didn't expect was that before the words fell, Dormammu's voice sounded again. But, hearing this previous sentence, everyone's faces were bad again, and their nervous hearts tensed again. The forces that had calmed down were mobilized again, and even more violently than at the beginning. For a while, the atmosphere that had just eased up not long ago was condensed again. The deathly silence reappeared. After seeing this scene, Dormammu smiled again, shook his head slightly, and then continued. After all, you have also spent so much energy to find me, and I have just entered the creation god level, and I am also curious about where my strength is now. I think we might as well try it and see who wins and who loses between us. When everyone heard this, they were silent after that, wondering what Dormammu wanted to do. Seeing the expressions of several people, Dormammu couldn't help but explain, "Don't worry, whether you win or lose, the earth will be fine, I promise." Hearing his assurance, everyone was relieved. After all, although Dormammu is still a little treacherous in the movie, it now seems that Dormammu not only has the wrong style, but also has the identity of the creation god, and he will not deceive them. At this time, little Loli immediately asked, "Uncle, you don't want to take the opportunity to hit us?" Hearing little Lori's words, Dormammu's face was a little wonderful. "Half a ring," he replied. "Even so, I also want to teach you a good lesson. After all, I am also a creation god now. You are all fighting, always let me out of anger." At this moment, Dormammu seemed to be an old urchin, thinking to the little Loli. However, hearing him say this, little Loli's eyes finally burst into a shocking light. At the same time, the streamer in his hand suddenly increased several times, and the speed of rotation and momentum also increased. Then, before they could react, little Lori had already rushed to Dormammu, and then, 2 white and tender palms had already slapped Dormammu's body. At the same time, his small mouth also immediately shouted to everyone, "Since, in this way, then I will not stay. I also want to teach the creator god a lesson, and if I can beat you, I will go to my father and tell him to ignore me." Little Lori's move, I don't know if they didn't react, even Dormammu didn't react. Although the little Loli is not big, the power in her hand is not small at all. You know, little Lori's strength is also sub-god level, and it is only slightly worse than Dormammu. In a hurry, the little Loli actually forced Dormammu to embarrassment. Seeing this situation, Suming and the others were also generous and bright. You know, Dormammu is a creation god, although it should be the weakest creation god, but there are not many opportunities to fight with the creation god. When they thought of this reason, everyone's hearts became eager. "Okay, I'm here too, Uncle Dormammu, be careful." Suming did not delay, the energy was poured into the long sword and the driving device, and then suddenly turned into a stream of light, towards Dormammu. The golden long sword also seemed to feel Suming's fighting intent, emitting a brilliant golden light. Before this light, even Dormammu couldn't help but close his eyes slightly. And after Suming joined the battlefield, Dormammu felt that his pressure had also increased a little. Suming's swordsmanship has advanced greatly through the training of the Headless Horseman, and it can be said that it is unpredictable. However, Dormammu did not care at all, but was very happy. After all, when he was fighting against the two, he could feel that the power he was not familiar with had been completely rounded. At the same time, he could also feel that Suming's battle did not exude killing intent, or was it really just a competition? He is also very satisfied with this. And when Ling Xian and Gu Yi saw the three people fighting together, they couldn't help but show helplessness in unison. Then, after looking at each other tacitly, they both saw the meaning of approval in each other's eyes. Therefore, the two did not delay, and after nodding their heads, they also turned into two streamers and successfully joined the battlefield. At this moment, the battlefield was completely hot. 2 sub-god levels, and a Heavenly Father level with time gems, plus Suming, who is not at the next god level even if he does not have much power. For a while, Dormammu was also very embarrassed. He has also just reached the Genesis god level now, and he is not very familiar with this kind of power use. And at this time, Dormammu is also very lucky, glad that he is not so dead-headed, thinking that his strength is invincible in the world, and the expansion is about to hit 4. If he really made that choice, he estimated that he would be both dead and crippled today. After all, if it were at that time, the offensive of these people would definitely be more terrifying. Moreover, the most troublesome thing is that even at that time, he did not dare to make a heavy hand. After all, a spirit show and a little lowly, both of them have the existence of the old creation god behind them. If they hit the small ones, after the old ones come, then they are in trouble. Therefore, with these considerations, and he really does not need the earth now, he has this result. However, from now on, it seems that he did this result very correctly. Although his current strength has not increased, his proficiency in the use of power, or his control, has increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. After all, his power to lift himself is not his own power, but also part of the energy of the scepter of the life court. However, after high-intensity combat, these forces and barriers have disappeared. For Dormammu, his decision is completely undeniable. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Filu novel app. These changes, Dormammu naturally understands. For Dormammu himself, his decision is completely undeserving. That was for Suming, and now he simply made a lot of money. First of all, he saved the earth, which is not faulty, and it is also the biggest goal of the trip. Secondly, no one knows how much he gained in this battle. It is not an exaggeration to say that it was the biggest gain of this trip. One is that in the battle with Dormammu, his swordsmanship has also improved considerably. There is nothing to say about this. After all, with this level, combat experience is especially important. Of course, this is not the main thing. The main thing is that in the process of fighting with Dormammu, Xiaoai's gains can be described as terrifying. First of all, as the top intelligent life, Xiaoai's learning ability is not covered. This can be seen from the speed with which she learns magic. And now, such a close observation, and also a presence in and out of the creation god to feed her, is simply a fairy treatment. Not to mention that there was a soul gem on her forehead that best matched her attributes. Xiaoai's growth rate is absolutely appalling. However, for this point, Xiaoai also knows the truth of making a fortune with a muffled voice. Therefore, except for Suming, who was connected with Xiaoai's heart, everyone did not know. Suming's harvest is not small, and Lingxian's harvest is also good. After all, as a sub-god level, although they are the daughters of the creation god, there is an opportunity to let the creation god accompany them as now. In actual combat, their momentum has also gradually improved. Every move I saw, the momentum was more terrifying, and the combat effectiveness was also stronger. For a time, the two sides also understood the spirit, and the two sides also had a tacit understanding to continue this discussion. Slowly, as the crowd grew, the intensity of the battle also increased. The entire space did not know how far away, it was crushed by the aftermath of their battle, and the space debris flowed unstoppably. If this continues, this dimension will be shattered by them. The three Captain Marvel, who were waiting for their news in the distance, also felt the aftermath of the battle. Their position is on the periphery of the dark dimension, and even the inner reality is one step away. However, even at such a distance, the three of them could still feel that violent aura. Even in the outermost part of the dark dimension, after the breath was transmitted, it still made them feel like they were about to suffocate. Moreover, what makes them even more frightened is that the breath is still increasing, that is, the battle is still escalating. When I thought of this, everyone's expressions couldn't help but be stunned. With their imagination, they couldn't imagine how terrifying the battle inside was, and the entire dark dimension was completely chaotic. Even Captain Shi, who was quite confident in his combat power, felt this power and was silent. Now she was suddenly a little depressed. I thought that my combat effectiveness was already at the peak of the earth and could become the guardian saint of the earth. However, after Fury contacted her this time, she learned that the original guardian of the earth had already changed to an unknown brat. Although he didn't care much about these false names, she was still a little unconvinced in her heart. In particular, after she heard Fury say that she was called here for a guy named Dormammu, she felt even more unconvinced. After all, Dormammu had also learned, a turtle cowering in his dark realm. It was only when she came to the meeting place and saw her teammates that he could feel that this battle did not seem to be so simple. A royal sister, a little lowly, a mage. She couldn't see through it all. And these people were all found by the Guardian, who was somewhat unconvinced. And later, when assigning the battlefield, was it the same as Thor thought? She also felt that if she was not the main C, she should be the deputy C, not cleaning up the trash outside. However, after feeling that momentum, she realized how outrageously wrong she was. Under this kind of battle, she is not even qualified as cannon fodder. For a while, she couldn't help but feel ashamed now. If Captain Marvel was a little ashamed, then Thor was now left with only despair. This kind of aftermath of the battle, let alone him, even if his father God is here, it is estimated that he will drink hatred. Could it be that the gap between me and him is already so big? Thinking that not long ago he regarded as a figure of the same level, this is only a few months? Has he grown to the point that he has to look up to? Even, the man's battle was not something he could participate in. When he thought of this, Soul's heart was also extremely bitter. Of course, this scene is definitely very exciting for Tony now. He was really happy for Suming. At the same time, Suming also let him see the future of science and technology, saying yes, I saw Thor, I saw Ling Xian, and then I saw little Lori. His heart was very entangled, and when he knew that there was an even more terrifying existence above, he also once wondered how the route behind his technology should go, or wonder if the road ahead is something that science can reach. After all, the existence of the Genesis God that can restart time and combat power is defined by the universe is too terrifying, so that he is full of doubts about the path of science and technology. However, now, his apprentices are telling him with facts that even if they use technology, they can still participate in this kind of battle and can take their own unique path. After thinking of this, his future route was also immediately determined. Although, he also knew that it was very difficult to fight against such a powerful existence, and even if he understood it now, he still had no clue. However, even if he didn't have a clue, Suming's performance at least gave him a glimmer of hope and allowed him to see what the future would look like. At this moment, Tony was extremely happy. Since this road can go down, then I will keep walking? Silently, Tony set himself a goal, that is, to go back and study his Iron Man as much as possible. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. Since this road can go down, then I will keep walking? Silently, Tony set himself a goal, that is, to go back and study his Iron Man as much as possible. Strive to be able to participate in this level of battle in the future, instead of his own apprentice fighting to the death with others, and he, the master, can only watch from the sidelines. This feeling, he didn't feel like he had experienced it a second time. Of course, these few people did not expect that even if it was a battle of this level, for Suming and the others, it was only to the point of competition, and everyone did not do their best, and each had his own hand. After all, if they go all out, the creation god will only have to fight, and the entire dark dimension is estimated to be completely GG. And the consideration on their side, Suming naturally did not know. He was still enjoying the excitement of the battle, and then secretly asked Xiao Yi from time to time to see if she had stolen a few more tricks. Then, in the midst of a very pleasant exchange among everyone, time flew by. 3 hours later, several people also began to slowly close their hands in a very tacit understanding. In the end, the battle finally came to an end after 4 hours. 4 hours later, Dormammu was still the same old gentleman on crutches. And Suming and the others now changed the appearance of desperate work at that time, but several people were sitting together, as if old friends were talking, and they all started talking softly. Uncle Dormammu, how are you feeling now? Little Lori is not afraid of life at all, and she keeps asking questions to Dormammu. And Dormammu also has a very good attitude towards little Loli, at least much better than them, with a faint smile on his face, as if at this moment he is not the king of the dark dimension, the creation god powerhouse, but an ordinary grandfather who is pulled by his granddaughter to tell stories. I feel that it is not bad now. There are still many forces that are not very harmonious, but now they are almost integrated. After Dormammu said this, the smile on his face became even brighter. Hearing his answer, little Loli also saw Lingxian's eyes, and immediately asked, "Then what are your plans for the future?" Hearing this question, Dormammu was suddenly stunned, and for a while the group did not answer, but instead lowered his head and pondered, as if this question was very difficult for him. For his state, several people did not disturb, they all waited quietly. Half a day. Only then did Dormammu raise his head, look at a few of them, and suddenly spoke. "My original plan was to devour the earth." Saying this, he suddenly paused, looked at a few people again, and saw that the faces of several people were quite normal before continuing to speak. "That's just my original plan. I don't have this idea." Hearing this, little Loli glanced at Dormammu without hesitation, and then immediately said with a helpless tone, "We know, Dormammu, continue." Hearing her say this, Dormammu continued. Then, with the earth as the center, he began to devour this dimension, and finally increased his strength to raise his power to the celestial god group, and finally found a way to upgrade to the Genesis god level. Saying this, he looked at his hands, then changed to a helpless tone, and continued. "However, now that I am already at the Genesis god level, even if I ascend again, it is impossible to go further and reach the level of the life court. I don't know what I'm going to do now, or what I want to do." In the last sentence, Dormammu's tone was very low. Hearing him say this, everyone was a little silent. They had not felt Dormammu's mentality, but they could also feel the helplessness in his tone. For now, Dormammu has gone from a dark boss who is busy invading the world all day to an idler who does nothing all day and is idle. For this, Suming attached great importance to it. After all, people tend to think about philosophical questions when they are idle. For example, why do people live? Who am I again? Where am I from? Where am I going again? Then, these philosophers often drill into the tip of the bull, and then desperately begin to search for answers. Of course, these things are not terrible, and the horror is that some philosophers are prone to some very bizarre answers. For example, worshipping the moon is to conclude that all human beings deserve to die, and human beings are stupid. Another example, Thanos wants to destroy half of humanity, as it is called, for the survival and continuation of mankind. So, Suming was really afraid that this Dormammu suddenly came up with an idea of destroying the world or killing half of the human race. Therefore, Suming was a little anxious now. However, he also knew that the priority was to find something for the idle Dormammu. Don't leave him idle. However, this thing is difficult to find. After all, Dormammu is also a creation god, or a king, so it is impossible for him to move bricks, right? Or let him enter society, receive unfair treatment, and finally anger him, directly blow up the earth with a skill. Sum up. Suming made a decision. Since you don't have a goal yet, let's go to Earth first, and consider these when you get to Earth. His words were very sudden, which surprised everyone. However, after thinking slightly, everyone also understood his thoughts, and they also supported him. Yes, Uncle Dormammu, you can play with us more. Little Lori began his fooling method again, trying to snatch Dormammu. I think it's okay. Ling Xian also expressed his opinion. And at this time, everyone set their eyes on Gu Yi. Koichi's opinion is important, after all, he is the guardian saint of the earth. Sensing the gazes of the three people, Gu Yi smiled slightly, and then calmly said to Dormammu, although you also came out of the earth, you can still go to the earth to see. After so many years, the earth has changed very terrifyingly. I believe you will be interesting, and you will definitely find your own fun.